Today, I want to talk about the importance of being known when we're in recovery from a pornography addiction. One of the deepest longings of every human soul is to be known, to be seen, to be understood, and accepted, especially in our most broken places. Yet, from the very beginning, we've struggled with this because if we look back in Genesis 3, after Adam and Eve disobeyed God, their first instinct was to hide. They sewed fig leaves together to cover themselves and they hid from God in the garden. Why? Because shame had entered their story and they were afraid of being fully seen, fully known, afraid that their failure would lead to rejection with God. And this is our story. When we struggle with addiction, especially something like pornography, our instinct is often the same: hide. We cover up, we avoid being fully seen, fully known, and we think that's going to protect us. But in reality, hiding doesn't protect us, it just isolates us, which deepens our shame and keeps us from actually healing, which is what we're looking for. So, one of the barriers to this is just the fear of being known. Like Adam, like Eve in the garden, shame convinces us that being deeply known will lead to rejection. Shame is this emotional driver behind our hiding, and it tells us this lie that if people knew the truth about our struggles, about our brokenness, about our sin, they would turn away and walk away from us. So we retreat, we put up walls to protect ourselves from that potential pain of rejection. It's important to remember that hiding doesn't just keep others from knowing us, it also keeps us from knowing ourselves. And when we avoid being seen, we avoid the truth of our stories, of our wounds. We numb our pain instead of addressing it. This is what creates the fertile soil for pornography to take root. It's why it's so powerful. It gives us the illusion of comfort without actually requiring any of that real intimacy that our souls necessitate. And it leaves us emptier than before, which just reinforces our shame and our isolation. But there's power in being known. And this is hopefully what gives us a lot of hope. When you allow yourself to be fully known, which means to let someone into the truth of your story, what have you lived, what have you experienced, you begin to experience the healing power of what we call confessional communities. These are spaces where vulnerability is met with not condemnation, but with compassion. Spaces where someone can look at you and say, I see you and I'm staying, I'm not leaving. And this is important because this is where healing can truly begin. When we engage our stories in the presence of others, there's something beautiful that happens in that space. Telling your story invites others to see you not as a problem to be fixed, which is oftentimes what we think of ourselves, but a person longing to be loved. And pornography addiction is often a response to wounds in our stories, and healing can only come when those wounds are seen and validated in relationship. And this mirrors the heart of God. Looking back at Genesis 3, after an Adam and Eve hid, God sought them out. He didn't abandon them in their shame. He didn't wait for them to come find him. He called them out. And the question he asked was, where are you? And that's such a beautiful question because it's not a condemnation. It's pursuit, it's love, it's invitation. Come out of hiding. Come to me. And we see that again in Psalm 123, which says, "O Lord, you have searched me, you know me, you are familiar with all of my ways." Being known by others reflects this divine relationship. It's a glimpse of God's faithful, unshakable love. Another benefit is that being known breaks the power of shame. Here's what we know: shame thrives in secrecy and it grows in the dark. But when you bring your struggles into the light, shame loses its grip. James 5:16 says, "Confess your sins to one another and pray so that you may be healed." And now notice what it doesn't say there. It doesn't say confess so you'll be punished and rejected. It says confess so that you may be healed. You are healed, beginning to be healed when you confess. And to be clear, confession isn't just about admitting sin, it's about reclaiming your own story. Addiction often distorts your sense of self, which reduces you to just your behavior, if it's just what I do. But when you bring your struggles into the light and you share that with another trusted person, you're essentially saying, this isn't all that I am, I'm more than this. And confession is an act of courage that lets you reclaim your dignity and see yourself as God sees you, which is one of the major goals of recovery, which is to simply agree with God about what he already says about you. Why is being known hard? Well, just to be honest, it's terrifying. It means risking rejection and it means giving up control, which are scary things to do, especially in something like a pornography addiction, which feels like this huge, deep thing that people are just not going to tolerate, and it makes us unlovable. Dan Allender describes self-protection as the armor of the wounded, which is a defense mechanism that we use to keep others at a safe distance. While we think this armor protects us from getting hurt, it also keeps out the relationships that are there to heal us. It's like living in a fortress. You're safe, but you're alone. Pornography thrives in this gap because you're isolated, and it offers a counterfeit intimacy. Even thinking about what pornography offers us, it really feels like this is going to check all the boxes. Thinking about our 5 core needs that we have: safety, significance, affirmation, competency, and control. Pornography really, at least the lie that we believe, is that it satisfies all of those needs. You're in control. You are competent. This is safe. Nobody knows about this. You're significant. You're the star of the show. You're affirmed. Like there's nothing you have to change. You bring who you are to this thing. And when we believe that that's going to actually satisfy those needs, we buy into the lie, which is why when we get to the other side of using pornography, we feel like absolute garbage because we were under the impression that we were going to get our needs met, and then we did it, and now we're just sort of left confused. That's when shame comes back in. It just makes a mess out of things. It allows you to feel wanted without the real risk of being known. And relationship always requires risk. What pornography promises is the reward of relationship without the risk, but it's not really a reward. It's this lie that you can have the intimacy, because intimacy is the reward of relationship. It's being known, but it's not easy. It takes risk. You gotta choose to trust that. And this false intimacy leaves you even more disconnected. Again, which we just said feeds that cycle of shame and addiction. So what's God's design for relationships? The good news is that God designed us for connection. We're designed for relationship. We're created to live in relationship, not isolation. Proverbs 27:17 reminds us, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. Relationships are the means by which God shapes and heals us. And again, that's on purpose. God's plan A is the church. What is the church? It's not a building, it's a group of people. God saves you into community with other believers. That's God's plan A. It's on purpose. Redemption happens in community because it's only in relationship that we can rewrite the scripts of our stories. God places people in our lives not just to challenge us, but to help us see ourselves as He does: beloved, redeemed, and worth fighting for. So, how do we do this? What are some practical steps to being known? Well, the first thing I would say is just pray for the courage to trust. Oftentimes, that's the most complicated part of this. We're wounded in relationship, we're also healed in relationship. And oftentimes, we get hurt because our trust is broken. And so then we put up walls and barriers to trusting again. And again, like I just said, we think that protects us, but it really doesn't. So the invitation is to lean into trust. And if that's hard for you and that's complex, and frankly, you just don't want to do it, the first step is just to pray and ask God to into that space and help you as you move toward trusting and taking that risk again. Another thing that we always say is we trust people who do trustworthy things. Not everybody's worthy of your trust, including people in the church, unfortunately. But take that slow. Trustworthy people do trustworthy things. So again, pray for the courage to trust and for wisdom to identify those right people who you can trust. Find someone safe, a mentor, a counselor, accountability partner. Those people are great, who can listen without judgment. Second, start small. Vulnerability doesn't mean spilling everything all at once to somebody. Take one small step at a time. You're sort of figuring out, is this person safe? Is this going to be a safe relationship as you go? Number three, commit to the process. Healing in relationships takes time. You got to be consistent, keep showing up, even when it feels awkward or uncomfortable. And over time, the fear of being known will give way to the joy and relief of being accepted. And finally, engage your story. Tell your story over and over and over again. Take time to reflect on the wounds that led to your addiction. You can do that by journaling, prayer, working with a therapist or a counselor who can help you make sense of your experiences and bring the clarity to the patterns that you actually want to change. Facing your story is stepping into the work of redemption. So I'll end with this. If you are carrying the weight of a pornography addiction, I just want to encourage you for a moment. Don't stay hidden. That was what I did for over 10 years, thinking it was keeping me safe, thinking it was keeping the peace in my house. I was protecting the people that I love from my secret, thinking, well, if they found out, this is going to blow things up. And I don't want to be the cause of blowing up their lives, which sounds noble, but it's still really selfish because I'm withholding the parts of me that, one, need to be healed, but two, they're longing to know the real me anyhow, which is the whole point of relationship. So if you can let your guard down and begin to trust people with those hard parts of yourself, that's when healing starts, and that's when God can come in and do some incredible things in your story. Being known is hard, but it's worth it. It's the door. It is truly the doorway to healing and freedom and deeper connection, which is what God designed you for. It's how we're supposed to live, free from shame and full of His love. And Genesis 3 reminds us that even when we hide, God is still seeking us out. He calls us to step out of our isolation and back into relationship. So if that's you today, I just want to encourage you to take that first step, whatever that looks like for you. Share your story with someone that you trust and take that step toward healing, because healing happens when you stop hiding and let yourself be known.